Hi, Liberty's Teeth here, and welcome back to the Tin Hat Ranch channel. Welcome to part 4 of the Surviving a Nuclear Bomb series, Emerging from Your Shelter. So far in the series, we've taken you step by step through a nuclear event from the initial explosion to improvised sheltering. We've shown you things that you can do with little preparation and a small amount of knowledge to increase your probabilities of surviving a nuclear bomb. The further we move down a timeline from the event, the more and more choices are available that will affect the outcome. This is the final installment of the series geared towards those that want to be prepared almost solely through knowledge. We will give you tips that will further increase your chances of survival when emerging from your shelter. Your life has now changed. You are now living in a post-nuclear age. I can only really focus this video on a few possible scenarios: the single event and a very limited exchange. Here's the reason. Up to a limited exchange, there would probably be continuity of government. In a very large exchange, you will have an EMFT and WROL situation, every man for themselves and without rule of law. With continuity of government, you can have coordinated evacuation and relief efforts. Without it, we are playing by a whole different set of rules that will involve many other survival skills that I will cover in other videos, but the subject is far too vast to cover in one video. So we will focus on the single event or limited exchange with continuity of government. When faced with dealing with the mess caused by a surface burst nuclear weapon, the costs involved would be so great, I feel the decision to create an exclusion zone around the blast and fallout areas would be the decision the government would make. If you are dealing with large amounts of fallout, you will probably be in one of these future exclusion zones. You will probably be forced, and maybe with good reason, to abandon your home and to relocate. At some point, your government will begin to enter this zone to deal with survivors, dispose of bodies, and survey the damage. Remember, if you have successfully dealt with lethal doses of radiation and your neighbors didn't prepare, they will probably be dead or very ill at this point. There's not much you can do for the living and very ill. They will either die or recover. That is the nature of acute radiation poisoning. They are not contagious whatsoever. In your case, one of two things is going to eventually happen. First, at some point, you're going to run out of food or water and be forced to leave to search for supplies. Second, you may receive a visit from a government official as they go door to door to tally the dead and search for survivors. They may force evacuation at this point if they find you. I don't know which is going to come first. It depends on far too many factors. In either scenario, you're going to be dealing with the same environmental factors and will have to deal with them. If you are a couple weeks out from the event, you may start to disassemble your improvised shelter, but you are going to have to continue spending the majority of your time in your basement or in the center room of your home. You may still want to keep this stuff around you. I just realized that an expedient shelter is probably not a comfortable one. There will still be a low level of gamma radiation you'll have to deal with, and you will still be accumulating exposure. You still want to eliminate this. What you also want to do, though, is create a clean environment. I've mentioned plastic sheeting before. It is something I recommend that everyone store in their homes. You can purchase sheeting like this from your local hardware store pretty inexpensively. The same goes for duct tape. Have enough to make a comfortably sized, clean room. Hang it from the ceiling and tape it to the floor. Keep everything you need to survive inside of this room. Also have enough on hand to do the same around an exterior door that is furthest away from your shelter. If you have enough on hand, cover every window and door and tape them, and every opening to your home. What you're trying to do is put as many barriers between you and the fallout particles as possible. This should be done as soon as possible after the event, but if you do not have any means of measuring the radiation levels, you must wait about 7 days. And when you do this, do it as quickly as possible. Don't worry about making the clean room by the door until just before you have to leave the shelter. There should only be a few reasons for leaving your shelter. The only reasons are to gather necessary supplies or evacuate. Evacuate means leaving in a safe manner to another location where you will not be exposed to fallout, or leaving because you are facing an immediate life-threatening situation, such as fire or attack. Leaving to get supplies should follow the rules of threes. You cannot live for more than 3 days without water or 3 weeks without food. Leaving your shelter will begin exposing you to the actual fallout particles. Your primary focus from here on out will be to avoid ingesting or inhaling fallout particles that are emitting alpha or beta radiation. While the more time elapses from the event, the lower the danger. For weeks and even months after the event, you're going to have to deal with this fallout. Chances are that the first thing you might have to find is water. In the first video, I told you to get a half a gallon per day of water per person for 10 days. Maybe you were able to do so, maybe you weren't. But there is an ace in the hole in just about everybody's house: the hot water heater. You may have 30, 40, 50 or more gallons of safe water. If you have a well, your pressure tank may have even more water. Use this water first. Food would be next. Everything in a sealed container inside of your house that normally wouldn't have spoiled is safe to eat. When your supplies are about to be exhausted of either food or water, it might be time to venture out and take a quick lay of the land around you. Time to check to see if the neighbors are home and alive, or dying, or dead. Remember, they have a water heater as well, and if they're dead, well, they may also have a pantry full of canned goods. You are going to have to follow some best practices when going outside. The first thing to do is pick clothing that you will wear outside. This clothing is never going to re-enter the main portion of your shelter once it is outside again. I think the best improvised gear to wear outside would be a rubber or vinyl rain suit if you have one, followed by some sort of synthetic fiber that has a DWR coating. You want to be covered pretty much from head to toe. Hood, scarf, long sleeves, gloves, pants, boots. The reason why you need to cover your entire body is you don't want fallout particles that will get on your skin or in your hair. Not that they are horribly dangerous on your body. You don't want to bring them into your relatively clean environment where they may be later ingested or inhaled. Most important when leaving your shelter is some sort of face mask. I recommend at least an N95 respirator. In fact, I recommend storing a case or two for this type of event. If you don't have one of these, then a cotton mask like this one is your next bet. If you don't have one of these, then use a scarf or t-shirt or something that you can tie around your head and put a barrier between you and the particles in your lungs. Also wear goggles if you have them. Your eyes are particularly susceptible to radiation. A hot fallout particle in your eye might lead to cataracts down the road. If you don't have goggles, then glasses or sunglasses would be the next best bet. Carry a plastic garbage bag inside of your clothing if you are going to be bringing back supplies. Before you leave, wherever it is that you're getting the supplies from, put the items in the plastic bag. This will avoid contaminating said supplies. Lastly, it is probably best to bring a sidearm with you for obvious reasons. When you do leave your shelter, try and stick to the sidewalks or roads. Don't walk through the grass or vegetation if you can help it. This is because rubbing against a tree or a bush will deposit fallout on your clothes. The sidewalks or paved areas are best because you limit your exposure to the bottoms of your feet. Spend as little time as possible to complete your task. Get back inside as soon as you can. Once inside, very carefully start removing the clothing, trying only to touch the insides of the garments. If you can, hang them up gingerly. Take everything off. Remove the supplies last from the plastic bag and place them outside your improvised clean room. Then re-enter the main part of your house with nothing on. You can look at this two ways. You can either never wear those clothes again, and each time you go outside you wear something new, which is fine if you can do that, or you can look at it from a probabilities perspective. You're reducing the exposure you would have gotten without taking any precautionary measures. Hopefully you don't have to leave too many times before either help arrives or you decide it is time to move on. Moving on, again, involves far too many factors to cover everything. How will you be leaving? Is the National Guard here to transport you? Are you completely on your own? Does your car still work but you didn't decide to bug out initially? Do you have to walk out? In any of these scenarios, there are a couple of things that you're going to want to keep in mind. First, cover yourself in the fashion I just mentioned. In addition, when you decide to leave, wrap whatever you are taking with you in plastic. Your bug out bag, food, containers of water, everything. If traveling by car, close the windows and turn off the fan, but if you can turn on the recirculator on the climate control system, all the better. If you are forced to walk, stick to roads. If you can walk in the center of the road, it's best. This is because rain may have washed fallout to the gutters and edges of the street. If you have small children, put them on your shoulders. Children are especially susceptible to radiation. On your shoulders, they are further away from the dust, and you can have control over what they touch and do. When you do leave, if you have no choice but to go out on foot, I recommend going as far as humanly possible without stopping in the first day. This keeps your bug out bag covered in plastic as long as possible and will limit its exposure and your supplies to fallout. Remember, this advice is for a single event or a limited exchange, not all-out war. By all means, there should be some direction on your emergency radio. Authorities may be working from the outside of the affected area inwards, and you may be one of the few still alive. They may not have made it to you weeks or even months after the event. I hope you never have to use this information, but if the unthinkable occurs, I hope knowing some or all of these things will save some lives. Below is the link that I promised you to the charts and graphs and information. In addition to this information, I recommend reading a book called Nuclear War Survival Skills, which is free for download. I have put a link to this in my guide. Much of the information I've talked about is in this book. The book also goes into great depth on things that you can do to further prepare. I'm going to continue this series, but it is going to be more focused on those willing to put much more effort into prepping in both time and money. Thanks for watching. If you found this series helpful and would like to know more about survival in other situations, please subscribe.